I've been looking for a house with no walls or no whispers, no hiding places, no secret sister. Been looking for a house that won't shelter a lie, no tear-stained past or reason to cry. I wanna live, live, live in a house of love. I wanna live, live, live in a house of love.
Welcome to EWE, Empowering Women Everywhere. I'm your host, Nan Gill, and today our guest is Diane Rosen. She is an artist, a writer, and an educator, and she's here to talk to us about some of her projects. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Nan.
How
Good
are
to
you?
see you. I'm
Good to see you as well. So, can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got started in the arts? And
Sure. Recently, I gave another interview at a local arts newspaper, and the person asked me that question, and I couldn't come up with anything until I realized that the beginning was sort of always there. So I went back to childhood, and my earliest memory is of me hiding in a school coat room, crouched next to all the books and book bags and boots, and I was cutting out paper snowflakes that we had been making in the class. And I was hiding out because it was cleanup time and I was supposed to stop.
Oh, and you didn't want to stop.
But I couldn't stop. And I was so fascinated by the intricacy and variety of these beautiful little delicate objects that I was able to make from cutting out, and with no, pre-drawn pattern, because you just fold and cut was fascinating. So that thrill with excuse me, just exploring your reaction to the world around you,
Right.
and expressing it in some way, has
How
always
old were
been
you?
there.
How old were you?
I think it was kindergarten, so I'm not giving away a year, but it was a while ago. It was a while ago. So that's always been there, and I really
and
think...
what happened when you were found?
What happened? I don't know, it's blank. They didn't do anything extreme, I'm sure. Maybe they withheld cookies and orange juice for a while. No, I don't think so. That was it.
But that was your beginning.
Yeah, it was just because it wasn't so much the doing as the feeling. The seeing and responding a certain way.
Right.
And that's really, for me, what the essence of creativity is. So, it was just the ability to see things in a certain way and react to it and explore it and express it.
Right. So you started in kindergarten in the coat closet.
And then I came out of the closet.
And then you went on and you went to school. Where did you go to school?
Well, I went to college in Maryland, which is where I grew up.
Okay.
I went to Goucher College, but actually in the intervening time, I had decided on art as a career. So I applied to just to art schools, to Rhode Island School of Design and Pratt in New York. And Pratt, I got into both, but Pratt offered me a scholarship, so I
Okay.
was going there. And then life took me in other directions, and I was then planning to stay local. Life being a male person, significant other, who was a lovely person, but it was way too young in age. But anyway, that's what I decided. He was at a Maryland school, so I switched, and I dropped Pratt, and I went to an academic school. But it's really my strong belief that everything does happen for a reason, and that to some extent you have to go with the accident, what appears to be accidental or
Right.
random, because really it's a little piece in a puzzle of a plan.
Right.
You just can't see it all at the same time.
Yep. You have
And-
to have faith and trust.
So I went to a good academic school, and I became an English major because I always loved literature and reading and writing, and when I got out of college, that's the path I took as a writer.
Okay.
And I moved to New York. I had married and then divorced and then moved to New York, And I needed to earn money, and my training had been in writing and in literature, so I continued with writing. And at a certain point, I just, excuse me, I just could not tolerate the thought that I wasn't in touch with that early part of myself that was so excited about cutting out snowflakes.
Yes.
Not that writing isn't creative, but there was a piece of me that always felt connected to the visual,
Right.
Seeing and expressing
Visual expression.
on a visual basis.
Right.
So that's when I took myself to art school, and I went to the Art Students League, because I didn't feel like matriculating again and doing a second college career at that
Right.
point. And so I went to the league, and I really gave myself a pretty academic training, by which I mean the first year I only drew. The second year I started with pastels and some oil painting, and then continued the third year to refine working in both of those mediums. And then when I got out, I applied for a fellowship, a painting fellowship through the Institute for International Education. And I did get a French government fellowship, so I was very lucky.
Wow, that's
I was
great.
able to live in Paris for a year and pursue my painting and study Degas, because I was already fascinated by pastel, and that's the medium I was using most of the time. And so I did my own work, and I studied Degas, which was super.
And what are some of the projects you're working on now?
Well, it's a variety of things. As I was saying, the random, should never be, discarded as irrelevant, because since I had a great formation in writing as a result of going to the academic school instead of
Right.
art school, initially, I do have a lot of enjoyment in writing about creativity. But I guess I would back up a little bit. I thought about creativity when I was getting a master's in English education, because I did want to teach. And I love teaching art, and I was able to do that, but to
Right.
teach English, either literature or writing, I needed a bit more than the bachelor's degree, just
Right.
because that's the way the system works.
Uh-huh.
And so I was getting my master's, and I don't even remember what it was that brought me into creativity studies, but it seems that it's become a discipline in its own right. And it's fascinating because there is a core of methods and ways of thinking and seeing that lie at the heart of every single creative endeavor. And by that I mean whether it's the sciences, math, cooking,
Right.
visual arts. In our culture, we tend, when we hear the word art or even creativity,
Right.
which is a very broad term, most people will tend to link it immediately to visual art, which isn't a bad thing in one way, but in another it is, because it's very limiting, and it's what leads many people, if they were asked, are you creative, or do you like to do any creative projects, and they'll say, oh, I can't even draw a straight line, which is so silly, because I don't think any artists can draw straight lines either.
Well, when I think of creativity, I think of all the arts. I think of music, I think of drama,
Yep.
I think of, visual art, I think of graphic art.
Yep.
But I guess for the most part, people think about just visual art for drawing.
When you say creativity, that's what a lot of people think.
Yeah.
And, it's very unfortunate, particularly for primary and secondary education, where it's been dropped from the curriculum right and left
Yeah.
for, purposes of lack of budgeting and so forth. But also, I think many administrators and some teachers who have that narrower view of creativity think, oh, that's just frivolous. If we had all the time and all the money, we would put crafts or art projects into
Right.
the classroom. But that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about that early concept of seeing the world, responding to it in your unique way,
Right.
thinking about it differently, expressing it, and giving it new meaning. And that's, to me, that's creativity, and it's in all the media, as you said.
Right.
And it's crucial. I mean, there
It's
is
crucial for every child to be alive.
Absolutely, absolutely. So some of my projects have included teaching more creative ways of writing in secondary schools, which I then put into a curriculum on bringing inquiry into the curriculum, questioning, challenging assumptions, arriving at what you think by letting it emerge from process,
Right.
which includes a little bit of chaos and a little bit of messiness, because clearly you can't, if you knew at the beginning where you would end up arriving, you wouldn't have to do anything. There wouldn't be any creativity or science,
Right.
Innovation. Nothing would exist. So you have to give yourself permission to just sort of take the leap and start the process, trust that you don't necessarily know where you're going, and in fact embrace that uncertainty, that it's all part of the process. So somehow I was able to find a way of harnessing some of that and not make it too threatening, and so I taught that, sort of co-taught with some teachers at a public high school in Manhattan, for imbuing the students, for the students to imbue their writing with more authenticity,
Okay.
and with researching social justice topics that mattered to them, which I really believe in giving students choice. And they wrote the most amazing papers. The teacher, the regular classroom teacher, was floored. And I still remember, this was in 2008 or 9, I think, I'm not sure. One of the young men in the class, this was 12th grade, and he wrote his paper about concussions because he was an athlete and how they're underreported and undertreated and whatnot. And I'm sure you're aware that this is like a very current topic.
A big issue.
Big issue. So they came up with fantastic things by just questioning and thinking about what mattered to
Right.
them and pursuing it.
Mm-hmm. So, this took place in the school, and you have a book that you wrote about.
Right.
this
So this
topic.
was it's really a curriculum guide. So it's not coffee table reading or bedside reading, but and it is for an English classroom. But the concepts, I guess, what I was trying to get at, I suppose, is that in writing this,
Right.
I realized that those concepts mattered so much to me, and that I felt them at work, whether I was painting at the easel or writing. And so I wanted to convey that, and it became the basis. What I did in this curriculum kind of became the framework of my teaching creativity empowerment,
Right.
which is more what I'm involved with now, because I'm not, in the secondary classroom anymore.
Right.
And
you have a
so-
workshop now that you have for creativity.
Yeah, so creativity empowerment, about thinking more creatively every day, and in everything you do, whether it's work or school or everyday activities like cooking or whatever one does.
Right.
So and a lot of it has to do with this giving yourself permission to enter, uncertain territory and let things be a little messy and chaotic, and take a non-linear route, because you can't, logic is wonderful, but it doesn't necessarily get you to your creative self, to creative expression.
Right, and also by being creative, you can be very alive. I think we were really all born to be creative.
I agree with you.
It's only in the school system and some of the ways that they teach children, whereas if you're really creative, you're considered a problem.
Absolutely.
Right.
And actually, in my brochure, I have what I think is just a terrific quote on that point. And this is, well, actually, there are two. I might read you two. This one is from Ken Robinson, actually, Sir Ken Robinson. He's a a British creativity theorist, and he gave a wonderful TED Talk on that. I think the title of the TED Talk may have been "Do Schools Kill Creativity?"
Right.
But if not, just Googling Ken Robinson, one could find his writing. So here's a quote from him. "We're running national education systems where mistakes are the worst thing you can make. The result is we are educating people out of their creative capacities." So I think that's a really good one.
That's a beautiful one.
And then there's another one. This is by an American writer, Tony Wagner. He wrote The Global Achievement Gap, which is sadly a true fact. Curiosity, imagination, and other habits of mind are, for future generations, what the 3 R's were before. They are the new basic skills for work, learning, and citizenship.
And what are those 3 again? Creativity?
Curiosity, imagination, and other habits of mind, creative habits of mind. Exploration, experimentation. And also, one of the most important ones, and I talk about that in my workshop as well, is not only giving yourself permission to make mistakes, but and suspending your critical judgment for a while. It does come into the process, because all parts of your brain, and this is the new neuroscience, there's no longer it's no longer considered valid. That it was fashionable for a while, but they've superseded the theory now that you create from the right side of your brain.
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
Right? Oh, that was around for a really long time. But there's newer neuroscience now, because they have these less invasive ways of measurements while people are given creative tasks, and it's really fascinating. So the thinking now is that it's interactive, like everything else. The brain, it's an interactive process.
Right.
But that what actually gives rise to creative thinking is not your logical brain. And it isn't, as simple as left or right. It's just everything is distributed everywhere. But there are pathways of logical thinking. Those are suppressed, and they can see this in MRI imaging of the brain. The logical, rational pathways or networks, really, it's not so much pathways would be too limiting, but the networks, those interconnected networks, are suppressed during creative thinking, and what's at work is what they call the default network. And we might call that our ancient brain, our unconscious, our emotional brain, our intuitive self, that those things are at work when we are incubating ideas. And then when those attain a level of intensity enough to come to consciousness, they pop into the conscious mind, and those are what we call the aha moments. But it's really owing to those kind of nether processes of our default region, default mode, where we don't have control. I mean, it's a wonderful illusion that everybody aspires to. I can control everything, it will happen because I make it happen.
Oh, I gave that up a long time ago.
Right? Yeah. Because it ain't so, you know?
That's right.
And
that's from an English major, it ain't so.
Yes, absolutely. My teachers are all rolling over and wherever they are. But I said it for effect. So that default mode network is at work, and we need to honor that for creativity. So that's one of the things that I do.
The workshops. And you have a website that if people want to find out more about your work, they can go on, and what's that?
I do. It's Rosenart, which is my last name and the word art together, ROSENART.net.
Okay, and what is your phone number, Diane?
So my studio phone number is 845-358-8008.
Okay, very good. So if anybody wants to find out about her classes or about any of the workshop that she's doing.
Right.
And now about your art work, because you're still very involved with your artwork.
Yep.
What medium are you working in for the most part now?
So I think I mentioned that pastel had become my favorite medium, and that still is. But in the last several years, I've been combining it with acrylic paint. So it's kind of mixed media, but it isn't very typical mixed media, although I don't know what that really means. There may not be any typical mixed media. But for me, the acrylic is a way of inviting chance and the unexpected
Right.
into my process. So what I do is I start with a good size handmade paper that I always use. It's like 27 by 39 inches. And I get usually black, but sometimes dark green or dark other colors, paint, acrylic paint, and I spatter the surface. I put the paper on the floor and I drip on it, or I spatter paint and just let that dry. And then I work with realistic imagery of figures in pastel over those
that.
serendipitous, markings. And the way things interact speaks to me and really helps generate the imagery and tells me, it kind of helps shape the negative spaces and the forms and the compositions. So I guess in a way it's symbolic, but it's also just literally a technique that I enjoy and that
Right.
works for me.
You're doing mostly the woman's body, and are you still
Yes.
mostly in that form?
I love the figure, and it goes in and out of fashion, with the trends in the art world, and I just sort of laugh because I believe you really need to find your own voice and go with it. So I
Right.
just do what I do, and sometimes that's fashionable and sometimes it's not figurative work. And I also do portraits on commission, so I don't do those as often. I do them as
Right.
requested.
So if someone had a portrait they wanted you to do, they could call you and set up
Absolutely.
an appointment.
And there
to
are some
discuss it
portraits on the website
on the website.
that people could see. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. And where are you showing now? I know that you have some shows
Right.
coming up.
I do. Thank you for asking. And I have a show coming up, a solo show at an area gallery. It's in Cornwall-on-Hudson,
Okay.
which isn't too far, and it's at the Green Light Gallery. So I will be. It's going up the end of next week, and it'll be there through October and the first half of November.
Okay.
And I'll also be doing a workshop in conjunction at the gallery, a one-day workshop in conjunction with the show.
And where are you teaching now? I know you teach at some schools.
Yes, I am an adjunct teacher, instructor at Rockland Community College in Suffern. That's right, it's in Suffern.
Okay.
And that is English, basic English composition and first literature classes. And then I teach studio art at the Garnerville Art Center in Haverstraw.
Okay.
So that's basically it. And then I wouldn't call it teaching, but I do love to do when I have papers that are accepted, I will give presentations at conferences. I've done a number of those. So that conference was it's a group I love, the Chaos Society, or
Sounds like something I want to join.
I you know what? I think you'd love it. I'll give you details after. It's the Society for Chaos Theory in Psychology and Life Sciences.
Okay.
So really, it's physicists, mathematicians, psychiatrists, medical doctors, therapists. I mean, it's this.
And you went to talk about a paper you had written?
So, well, I wrote a paper. I wrote an abstract and submitted it to talk about creativity, chaos, and because I mean, the kind of. You might have had a glimmer here, what I've been talking about, that my process is somewhat chaotic and I like inviting chance into the process and a certain amount of randomness. These are all things that chaos theory talks about.
Mm-hmm.
They're the things that have hidden predictability, but to us mere humans, it's completely random and unpredictable.
And I wanted to also ask you, what is your experience as a woman in the art? Do you find that there's some challenges that you come against, or anything that, you've experienced, or anything you know about with regard to that?
Well, of course, when there are rejections from a show or from galleries or whatever during over the course of a career, one never knows if that can be ascribed to gender or the work
Right.
just wasn't a match. So it's hard to say really specifically.
Right.
But I do know that in general, it's very hard for a woman to make it big in the art world. I mean, I feel fortunate because I create my work, I show my work, sell the work. It's
beautiful.
Well, thank you very much.
It's absolutely
Appreciate
beautiful.
that. But I'm not a household name, obviously, and so to make it to that level, it's really rare for women these
Right.
days, and that's just so wrong. I mean, there have to be at least as many brilliant women artists
Yes.
as there are men, and yet the representation in museums and galleries is so lopsided.
Right. Yeah.
Last month there was an article in the New York Times where they kind of wanted to check in and take the pulse of what's
Right.
going on now. And apparently in 1985 they had gone around to all the major museums, and I don't actually know if it was just in New York City. I think so, but I'm not sure. But anyway, certainly the major museums in New York City and the blue chip, top ranked galleries.
Right.
And the statistic in 1985 was that women who had solo shows at these institutions
Right.
were 0 to 1
Right.
in each museum or major gallery. So in 2015, they tallied again,
Right.
and it's gone up 100%.
We now have 1 to 2.
We now have 1 to 2 women being given solo shows in major museums and blue chip galleries to, the rest of the percentage all being male.
Okay.
Not right.
No,
It's not right.
it's not fair to the public either, because if I didn't know you personally, I wouldn't know of your beautiful work. So,
Well, I thank you again, and it's not. It is unfair to the public, and in numbers of ways, and it's unfair to future generations of young women. And this is one reason. Also, I've done my workshop in schools, and I've written for parenting publications. I actually hope to do more for parents, talking to them about creativity and enhancing your child's experience of themselves as creative
Right.
people. As you said, we are born creative.
right.
And yet so many institutions along the way seem to, wear it down and train it out of us. So I think that's really important for young women to see
They
role
try to-
models.
Yep.
and-
They try and suppress it rather than embrace it.
Right. Absolutely.
So, but at any rate, if anyone here is interested in becoming more involved in creativity and creative workshops, and to find out about Diane's work, you can go to rosenart.net or
Right.
give her a call and find out, and make sure you get to see her exhibit
At
and-
Greenlight. Yep.
At Green. You want to give us that information where that is again?
Sure. Greenlight Gallery. It's 240 Hudson Road in Cornwall-on-Hudson.
Okay. And thank you so much for being a part of Empowering Women Everywhere.
Thanks, Nan.
And follow us at Empower Women TV.